a very similar set of goals that we all want to get to tonight, that we're all trying to find a way to that same end goal. I think most everyone in here is, at least on a global level, trying to get to kind of the same place. And I think we've seen why there are more consensus items in the CJI report than non-consensus items, because we're all trying to kind of come to the same end result. The issue is we're trying to figure out how to get to that result. And, you know, that isn't always an easy thing to figure out. There's a group of people who worked together over a long period of time this summer, who have expertise, who've seen what's worked in other states. When they put this together, it's not like they're just throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. What they're doing is their process that has proven to bear fruit in the past and has helped other states in the past to try to make a safer community and at the same time lower their recidivism rates and figure out how to keep people, the most dangerous people, those who jam out, from going back into the community without having someone who's going to watch over them and help them to readjust to life amongst all of us and keep an eye on them and see if they start going down the wrong path. And I think that's something that we should all sort of be able to get behind. And the way to do that, of course, is to incentivize them. So I have great hope, colleagues, that after going through this somewhat painful day of a lot of talking
1 minute.
about sentencing reform and all of the things, we've had other conversations about the budget, which is good too, but that this process of going through all of this together, it's kind of like when I was in seminary, I used to have what I called broom closet theology, which is you can't hate anyone if you're locked in a broom closet with them long enough. I mean, with the caveat that you both emerge alive, you probably don't hate the other person anymore because you see their humanity. I think we've been stuck in this room long enough. We're starting to understand there may be some compromise. There may be some way where we all get to a safer community. So let's keep working, colleagues. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Clerk?
Mr. President, priority motion, Senator Michaela Cavanaugh would move to bracket the bill until April 5th, 2022.
Senator Kavanaugh, you're welcome to open on your motion.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't know if this motion will go until cloture or not, but I would highly recommend not voting for it. It is just a placeholder for time. And I figured you all wanted to hear me talk for 10 minutes straight at 9:22 at night. So I think the last thing I was on was the Kearney project. And so we're giving $15 million to the Kearney Yrtc, which is the Youth Rehabilitation and Treatment Center in Kearney. And that is where our male youth are sent when there's really nowhere else to put them for a variety of reasons. Some of them are because of being system involved, but there's all kinds of reasons that a person could go there. And so back in 2019, when Geneva had the emergency on their campus where the girls are, and I think I thought about this a couple days ago, or maybe it was last week. It might have been Senator DeBoer, said something about the sky is falling or the ceiling is falling. And at YRTC Geneva, the ceiling was literally on the floor. So that's where they were at. The sky wasn't falling, it had fallen. And so understandably, the youth that were there were not pleased, and they made their objections known, and they were moved in an emergency to Kearney. And this was my freshman year, so this started a really long journey for me of learning a lot about our child welfare system and our juvenile justice system. So they moved to Kearney, but it's a boys' campus. And so they had to move all of the boys out of a building, and they had to have the girls in a specific building. And because of our youth rehabilitation treatment centers are this kind of strange mashup of corrections and DHHS. So they have to abide by PREA, which is a corrections policy. And so the boys and the girls couldn't be commingling or together. And so you can imagine teenage boys and teenage girls who have been on separate campuses and now are on the same campus, how much fun that was for the staff. So then that led us to moving or renting, leasing, sorry, it's late, leasing part of the youth detention center here in Lancaster County and turning that into the Lancaster YRTC, I believe. Right? Yeah, I think so. And so we ultimately shut down the Geneva campus and took over a campus also in Hastings. So now the female youth in the YRTCs are in Hastings and the male are still in Kearney. And then we now have this facility here in Lancaster County that is for high acuity and really has a lot of really great specialized behavioral health treatment happening there. And so, to be honest, something that was a complete tragedy turned out to activate us to do something really good and move in a new direction. And I think that this piece, this Kearney campus piece, is the next great step that we can take to make sure that these youth who are system involved are living in nice-ish accommodate as nice as can be, because the accommodations that they currently are in are terrifying. So with the metal beds and in a big room, and it's like a big room with metal beds, and the lights are always on, they're fluorescent lights, and so it's kind of unpleasant, as you can imagine. The accommodations at the other campuses are not like luxurious. When I say nice accommodations, they're not luxurious accommodations, but they are private and safe and more humane than just a big open room. And also, I mean, I grew up with 5 brothers, and having them in just a big open room every single night would have probably sent my mother to an early grave. So I can't imagine having, 20 boys in a big open room. Okay, so that's the YRTC, and that's part of the reason that these cash funds are important, because this one, LB 792, which I believe was Senator Lowe's bill. Is that correct? Yes. LB 792 was Senator Lowe's bill. Another thing that's in a lot of these cash funds are related to our youth and helping lift our youth up. So we have the middle income housing. Anything that has to do with housing is going to positively impact the lives of young people, because housing insecurity is devastatingly disruptive to youth. If they don't have a place to sleep at night that is safe and secure, how can we expect them to get up in the morning, go to school, and thrive? So LB 1252 is the Middle Income Housing Fund. And I'm not sure whose bill that was. I think maybe Senator Williams. Was that Senator Williams? Yana? Senator Bouchard? Was Middle Income Housing Senator Williams? Oh, Senator Vargas. Glad I checked. I have to fact check with the number 1 female member of the Appropriations Committee, Senator Anna Wishart, always here to help. Thank you, Senator Wishart. So Middle Income Housing Fund, LB 1252, that was Senator Vargas, and it creates a middle income workforce housing program that was established in 2020 and financed with 10 million transferred from the general funds. The funds would be used by the Department of Economic Development to provide grants to nonprofit development organizations with a 1-to-1 match. Oh, sorry, I just realized I would just roll right into another 5 minutes. With a 1-to-1 match requirement, grant funds are to be used for workforce housing development in urban communities. This would include new construction of owner-occupied housing in a neighborhood and community with a demonstrated need for housing that is affordable and attractive to first-time homebuyers. That concept of it not being a rental property but being a homeowner is really essential to that building a pathway out of intergenerational poverty, to have home ownership, to have that equity, to have something that you can always have for an emergency, a house. That's a huge thing for equity. And intergenerational poverty is oftentimes associated with housing insecurity and food insecurity and lack of access to education and healthcare. So that's a great step for addressing intergenerational poverty. I know I've talked about the task force that happened a few years back with Senator Kathy Campbell and Senator Heath Mello, and I keep talking about it and I keep forgetting to get you all a copy of it. So I apologize. One day I will remember. Of course, you can all probably get a copy yourselves, but it's a really interesting approach and concept, and I think it is worthwhile in the discussion about justice reform, sentencing reform, corrections, housing, food. All of these things are really intertwined, and in communities, and even more specifically in households that have intergenerational poverty, it is very often very closely tied to incarceration of family members. And it is also known that when a family member is incarcerated, it is much more likely that other family members that are the next generations will also be incarcerated. And so it's not just about addressing recidivism, but also addressing how do we stabilize those next generations and make sure that they have the tools that they need to succeed moving forward. I think you said 1 minute.
20 seconds.
I will yield that to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Erdman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening. There are, believe it or not, some people watching from home. I have no idea why, but they told me they were. And they were wondering what we were doing. And I'll explain it to them. First of all, we've spent 32 hours on the 3 budget bills and the ARPA bills. 32. When we get done here at 10:30 this evening, we will have spent another 12 hours. That's 44 hours of time wasted. And that's probably okay because we're not passing other bills, but there are things that need to be done. So what we're doing, and Senator Lathrop and the group are doing a fabulous job of wasting time. And if you're interested in prison reform, put 920 up there, let's talk about it. But that's not what we're doing. We're doing this for several reasons. One, we want to make sure we never get to an amendment to actually build a prison. We have not decided to build a prison. We set aside money that if a prison is found to be needed, we have the money to do that. We haven't decided to build a prison, but they're worried that we may put an amendment to do that. So that's one reason why we have wasted 44 hours. Second reason is they're not wanting to get to talk about Senator Albright's bill that would take away funding from the Department of Education to teach things that shouldn't be taught in any public school, private, or any other kind of school. That's the second reason. The third reason is we don't want to deal with the budget. I've only been here 6 years, but I've never been in a budget discussion that we spent 44 hours and we didn't really talk about the budget. And so that is probably a good thing for those who don't have to defend the budget. And so we don't get to any other amendments except what has been put up there. So that's what we're doing. So 44 hours is more than one full work week for most people. And I can see why people at home are wondering what we're doing. They sent us here to actually accomplish something. So if prison reform or sentencing reform is that important, why don't we just fast forward to 9/20, put it up there and see what it is? The governor and the committee, I think, agreed to about 85% of what was suggested. Why wouldn't you just take that 85% and move on? I don't know the answer to that, and we probably never will. So maybe we need a rule change that says, if you want to run a filibuster, the person will introduce the bill, and then if we get a major majority, like 35 votes, we just automatically fast forward to closure and forget about wasting 8 hours of everybody's life. But stop and think about it for a moment, how much money we've wasted on salaries being paid by the staff that's here till 10:30 per hour to do 44 hours of a filibuster. Those are tax dollars. But we have plenty of money. Don't worry about it. We have plenty of money. And the comment was made earlier by Senator Vargas that he didn't want to
1
add
minute.
to the next year's budget. Well, I'm here to tell you it's 9:35 p.m. and we have added to the ongoing budget at least 10%. Those contributions, those appropriations that we made from ARPA will be ongoing obligations that will be as much as 10% increase in our budget the next time we do a budget. And when we get to that point, and it is 10%, it will be not much value when I stand up and say, I told you so, because we'll already be in the hole. This revenue will not continue as it has in the past. We've got a drought going on that's pretty significant, and agriculture is what drives the state. So just wait and see. We will have a shortage again, and when we came in 17, we're down $1.1 billion.
Time, Senator.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Moorfeld, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues. So first off, I don't think we've wasted any time here in the sense that we're talking about probably one of the most important issues facing our state, and that's keeping our communities safe. And right now, what we are doing is not keeping our communities safe. It is absolutely not keeping our communities safe. The status quo is unacceptable. And quite frankly, we can talk about that for an entire session, and I don't think it'll be a waste of time. And we're not wasting very much money because last time I calculated, I make about $2 an hour here. So I think we're okay. And we can continue having this conversation until we actually do something, Senator Erdman, something you haven't been a part of. And so let's talk about what the solutions are. Let's get together and actually do something different, because we aren't doing anything different and our communities aren't any safer for it. Going back to the actual data and not just anecdotes, Mississippi in 2014 and the 5 years prior to JRA, Mississippi's violent crime decreased by 3%. In the 5 years following JRI's enactment, violent crime continued to decrease at a rate of 4%, while national violent crime rates increased by 6% during this time. Utah, 2015, in the 5 years prior to JRI, Utah's violent crime rate increased 3%. In the 5 years following JRI's enactment, violent crime continued to decrease at a rate of 1%, while national violent crime rates increased by 2% during that time. Maryland, 2016, in the 5 years prior to JRI, Maryland's violent crime rate decreased by 5%. In the 4 years following JRI's enactment, violent crime continued to decrease at a rate of 6%, outpacing the national decline of 5% during that time. Oklahoma, 2017. In the 5 years prior to JRI, Oklahoma's violent crime rate decreased by 4%. In the 3 years following JRI's enactment, violent crime continued to decrease at a rate of 6%, outpacing the national decline by nearly 2 percentage points during this time. So, colleagues, I've read through all of the statistics and the data from the FBI and other national sources that indicate that after adopting JRI, communities were safer, crime rates were down, and the results were positive. So when folks get up on the floor and say, this is going to lead to higher crime, this is going to make our communities less safe, it just simply isn't true, and it rings hollow. And it's particularly disappointing when we provide anecdotes, specific instances, without all of the context behind those instances and how these reforms actually would have potentially led to different outcomes with those individuals because they jammed out. So when we bring up specific instances, one, I think we have to ask ourselves, is that anything that people could disagree with? So the instances that Senator Geis brought up earlier is a good example. I don't think anybody could disagree that those are violent individuals that should be in prison. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. If they do, I haven't heard it on the floor and nobody's come up and talked to me. What's enlightening about those two instances, though, are those are two cases that exemplifies the problem that Senator Lathrop has been talking about. Those are individuals that jammed out based on the failures of our current system, the current system that we are trying to reform and prevent. So we can continue to provide anecdotes without the proper context. We can continue down the path that we've been continuing down for the last 8 years, but our communities aren't any safer. Our prisons are continuing to be overcrowded, and people are coming out of it worse than they went in, which makes our communities less safe. So I think that this is an important discussion to be had. And I think dedicating a few days to it is worth the time. The only thing I regret is I'm not quite sure anybody's going to do anything different. So colleagues, I urge you to consider doing something different. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Vargas, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. Oh, hello, Senator Williams. Thank you, colleagues. I just wanted to continue on with a couple of thoughts on this. You know, one of the things that I want to make sure people understand about our current population of individuals in the correction system here is there's the overwhelming percent of individuals that have been diagnosed with some sort of mental behavior, substance abuse issues. And it's important to recognize, because if we see about 70% of our population that has those issues, our first response should be, how do we make sure that we're addressing these while they are in the system? And how can we make sure that's happening? Because if we do address these issues, then we're going to find more pathways for the people in the system to be able to get education, to get training, to get support, utilize the programs, many of which have been talked about on the mic, that are going to make sure that when they eventually do hopefully get back into society at some point, they have some level of skill and development and have been provided the mental and behavioral health treatment that will make it better for them and for our communities. I want to see more of that in terms of the plan of action here. I think what we tend to do here is we're very reactive in terms of the policies. And one of the things that's probably the most frustrating is even when we talk about these sentencing reforms, I hope the public and or people don't see them as a one-time reaction now to this conversation about expanding or creating a new prison. Because if you actually looked at the correction system and the Judiciary Committee, not only back when Senator Lathrop was in here in the legislature previous, but even now under his tenure, these bills and this conversation has been an ongoing conversation, many discussions and many hearings on this subject matter. It's more the will of the majority of the members on whether or not there is something we can and should do about it. And at the same time, there's also the will of the governor's office to want to do a pragmatic, balanced way of addressing this overcrowding situation and the clear data that's driving the increases in what we have to do here. There is a pathway here that I hope everybody understands, that it doesn't matter even in the child welfare system. Look, in the child welfare system, we don't simply say we need more child welfare workers to be able to meet the underlying demand. That is not what we talk about even in appropriations. We're asking about case counts. We're asking about the quality. It's also what we're expecting now of the administration and what we did when we had Promise Ship. The reason why we asked those questions is because we didn't just talk about making sure we were growing to meet the need. We're also trying to address making sure that fewer children were in the child welfare system. Because if we address that need, we're also not growing this part of the pie of our budget. I think that is a pragmatic expectation of what we would look for, not only from this body, but also from the administration. I know we've had many of those conversations, and I've asked that of the director, but we are where we are right now. And the place where we're at is, can and should and do we have the resources to do
1 minute.
something that's going to be a proactive way of addressing these issues right now? And the answer is, we don't have enough of a plan, but we do have clear policies in place that we can do something about. We're not just represented in 920. There's more things that we haven't put on the table yet. And we absolutely need to do something. Because at the end of the day, we're constantly talking here about saving more resources. I don't disagree with Senator Erdman. We've had this conversation in appropriations about not sort of slowing spending. And he is a bit of a fiscal hawk when we talk about doing those things. He asks those questions. And we discussed them with ARPA, but we've also discussed them with main general fund appropriations and code agencies. And we do it because it's the responsible questions to ask. We've always invested in our correction system when there was a need for investing in people, in resources, in FTEs.
Time, Senator.
Thank you.
Senator McCollister, you are recognized.
Good evening, colleagues, friends all. To hear a familiar refrain. As I look around the body, I see everyone that I consider a friend, truly a friend. Of the 48 other senators in this body, I can't think of a single person that I really don't like. But as I review the way some people make their decisions, I'm a little distressed. Why do I say that? As we look at the facts of this situation, we are the most overcrowded prison population state in the country. We have made a mistake somewhere down the line. No mistake about that. When did we make that mistake? I consider 2015 as the date we made a mistake. LB 605 came to the body, and we decided to kick the can down the road. Are we going to do that once again? Are we going to do that in 2022? Am I going to be sitting on my patio telling people about where we went wrong on prison reform? I hope not. I hope we can come out of this with a system and a plan to deal with this prison overcrowding situation. I think that includes criminal justice reform. If we want to deal with the jam out situation, yes, we need to look at sentence reform. We want people to go through the programming, but we're sure not doing that now. Too many people jam out with the essential programming that they need. And we have no plan. What is the plan? How big a prison do we need? Without vision, the people perish. And without vision, I think we are on the wrong road, the same road that we followed in 2015 when we put down LB 605. We do need a plan. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Lathrop, you are recognized.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, good evening. I want to continue on this list of non-consensus items. And one of the items on the non-consensus requires a bit of an explanation. And it's the one, the last one on the list that says requires specific findings before court can impose consecutive sentences. Let me read that section, which is section 14 of the bill. It says, except when a consecutive sentence is required by statute, the court shall not order a sentence to run consecutive to another sentence, whether being imposed at the same time or already being served, unless the court finds on the record that at least one of the following aggravating factors applies. Now, when we talk about consecutive sentences, by the way, colleagues, some of them are mandatory, primarily with mandatory minimums. There are some gun offenses that carry a mandatory minimum. Those are non-discretionary, and we don't change that. We're talking about the 86% of consecutive sentences that are discretionary. The factors are as follows. The offense occurred on different days. So someone who's going on commits a felony on day one, the next day he gets up and he commits a felony on the second day, that would be eligible for consecutive sentences. The offense involves the use of force or threat of serious bodily injury against separate victims. So if you pull a gun out on 4 people, you can get 4 consecutive sentences for that. That is not a situation where concurrent sentencing is necessary. The third consideration is one of the offenses is a violation of several of these sections that are listed. They're sexual offenses. So if you're engaged in several sex offenses, they would not require that you go through this process before imposing a consecutive sentence. And the fourth consideration is one of the offenses was especially heinous, atrocious, or cruel, or manifest exceptional depravity by ordinary standards of morality and intelligence. So the idea behind consecutive sentences, and this is kind of a big deal. This is a needle mover, if you will, colleagues, and why it's important. Oftentimes when somebody commits an offense, and having been in the Judiciary Committee, we see a lot of times prosecutors will come in or the Attorney General will come in and go, I had this case and this guy did this and we couldn't get a conviction. And so we make a new crime and make a new felony. And we've done that for a long time, generations. And the consequence has been oftentimes you can commit an offense and be guilty of about 4 or 5, I'm exaggerating, 3 or 4 things in a single occurrence. So for example, you go in to a store to steal something. Let's say it's something expensive. You go steal an Apple computer. If you do it at gunpoint, you're now at about 3 felonies. If you don't do it at gunpoint, but you get in a fight on your way out, that can be another one, depending on how seriously it is. If you run from law enforcement, that can be a third. And so in one criminal activity, you pick up 3 felonies. And the idea here and why this is important in this reform process is if you can be charged with multiple felonies, all for the same thing, then the point is that those should run concurrently, and your sentence will end up being the longest one of the 2 or 3 or 4, or however many it is. Why did this end up here? When you look at the data from CJI, what you will see and what they noticed is whether a person gets consecutive or concurrent sentences, varies wildly depending on what jurisdiction you're being sentenced in. So in Douglas County, they impose consecutive sentences only 10% of the time, discretionary consecutive sentences. This wouldn't affect Douglas County very much, but there are other jurisdictions where it is used
Time, Senator.
20% of the time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Senator John Kavanaugh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I always appreciate following Senator Lathrop because I was actually thinking of planning to speak on the same subject matter that he was talking about, that particular section. And I was sitting here looking at it, and I was looking at the CJI PowerPoint presentation. And I think Senator Lathrop was just referencing some of those particulars. But if you look at that PowerPoint presentation on page 32, in particular, it has the least serious offenses are most likely to have consecutive sentences. And Senator Lathrop was correctly pointing out that there's a disproportionate application of the law, which is this discretionary ability to stack these sentences on top of each other across counties in the state. And there are some counties that are putting more charges on top of each other than others and sending more people for longer periods of time for these offenses. But if you look at this, class 4 felonies have a single conviction, which means there's only one offense, 40%. Concurrent sentences only 30%, and then 30% of class 4 felonies are consecutive. And so a class 4 felony, if you recall, is the lowest level felony. So it's a felony felony is a penalty, an offense for which a penalty is more than a year. So a class 4 felony is 0 to 2 years, meaning they can sentence you from 0 to 2 years. But Senator Lathrop laid out a scenario under which someone could have multiple offenses in the same conduct, and that then those get stacked on top of each other consecutively. And I would pose to Senator Lathrop that there's a much easier way to accomplish that, which is possession of a controlled substance. If somebody has, say, some prescription medication that is not theirs, and they have a bottle that has 10 pills in it, that technically could be 10 separate offenses, 10 separate class 4 felonies that could be charged separately, could be sentenced consecutively. And so and those sorts of things, people do get separate offenses for separate controlled substances within their own pocket when they get stopped by the police for some sort of traffic infraction, or if they're shoplifting and they get stopped and they have the controlled substance in their pocket, they could get all of those offenses stacked on top of each other. And so that's a very simple way that somebody could have consecutive sentences in one foul swoop, as it were. And so I was sitting here looking at the list. I've got a 78-page document here, which is the list of all of our offenses in the state of Nebraska by classification. So I was just flipping through class 4 felonies. And one that jumped out at me is violation of a grain dealer act. I'd just be curious what that is for anybody. If anybody has an answer to that, I see somebody who I think I might ask that off the mic over there, who I know knows about at least the wheat board, if not grain dealers. But this is, as Senator Lathrop was talking about, and I'm jumping on top of as well, is that we have a large number of people in custody. And again, you can go back to the jail census, prison sentences, showing the number of people in custody. 770, if I remember right, are in on theft-related offense, or I'm sorry, on drug-related offenses. 770 is their highest level of offense. And then if you look at that same page, which is page 2 of 8, it has the recidivism rate. And I was sitting here thinking about this, and you can look and you can see prison discharge goes down for recidivism, but this PRS goes up at its creation in 2017, which Senator—
1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. President. McAllister just talked about LB 605, which created this new status called post-release supervision. And you see people decreasing the number of people being released, committing reoffending, but then people on PRS, post-release supervision, reoffending. Those are individuals who had class 4s, class 3s, and class 3As, who then got released to post-release supervision after their mandatory release date. And those are the people we're talking about here with those lower level offenses getting mandatorily released after stacking them, and then reoffending. With that, I will push my light again. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. Senator Erdman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, how much time do I have left? How much time do I have left?
You have 3 minutes, 20 seconds.
Thank you.
Give the transcribers a break here.
Mr. President, how much time do I have now?
You have 2 minutes and 15 seconds.
2:15. Time flies when you're having fun. You know, what I said in these first 3 minutes makes almost as much sense as what other people have been saying when they're talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. Senator Moorfeld, you are recognized.
Well, I'll actually use my time to talk. And since Senator Erdman doesn't believe that what we're talking about makes sense, and that apparently overcrowded prisons, the most overcrowded prisons in the country, isn't worthy of the time that we're here tonight, I'll discuss it a little bit more. This is an important issue that we are talking about. And the fact that we are talking about this long is because of the inaction of people like Senator Erdman. So he can get up and talk about how this is useless, this is a waste of time, and all those things. But the bottom line is, it's not a waste of time to be discussing these things. It's not a waste of time. And the reason why we are sitting here talking about it this long is because there has been inaction on it. And some folks may think that that inaction is worthwhile and that that makes our community safer. But the problem is that factually it does not. And we have people coming out of the system worse than when they went in. So I don't find this funny. I don't find Senator Erdman sitting there for 3 or 4 minutes saying nothing cute or a point deserving of time or of this body. The bottom line is that we do have an acute problem in this state with prison overcrowding. And this body has failed to take action on it, action that in other states have proven to make their communities safer. And I think that we should do the same. I went through all the states today that have taken the action and the recommendations put together by bipartisan committees to actually address overcrowding, but not just overcrowding, but actually creating policies that make our community safer. And this has been proven by data. I can go through the data again, but it's clearly falling on deaf ears. So in the meantime, we're going to continue to discuss this. And to Senator Lathrop's point earlier, he's worked on this for 4 years now. I know it was an interest of his before he was term limited in his first 2 terms. And despite Senator Lathrop being eminently reasonable on these issues and being somebody who works hard, probably one of the hardest workers in the body, there's a bunch of them here, nothing's happened. And so that's why we're here at 10:04, 10:05 now, because this is an issue worthy of debate, worthy of discussion, and worthy of action. And yet we have failed to take action. We have failed to take action, and our communities are not safer for it. And it's detrimental to our state. And so I do hope that we take some kind of action on 920. I will follow Senator Lathrop's lead on that, if there is any room to compromise or be found. But the bottom line is we need to do something, colleagues.
1 minute.
Because what we're doing right now isn't working. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Morfeld. Senator Michaela Cavanaugh, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too will be using my time to talk to my colleagues and the people of Nebraska. It's after 10 o'clock now, so I don't recall who was talking about how long we've spent on debating the budget, but I mean, it's over $1 billion. It seems worth taking every minute to talk about it. And the first day that the budget was discussed, a lot of people did get involved in the conversation, and I think that was really great. It's important because it is our job. It is the only thing that we absolutely have to do. Everything else that we do is just gravy, but the budget is what we have to do. And so taking as much time as is available to us to discuss the budget is extremely appropriate. And the fact that so many people in this body have spent so many hours talking about the piece of the budget that is the prison is significant and substantial. There are people who over the last week have been spending a lot of time discussing sentencing reform and the pros and cons of building a new prison, or what are the guardrails around building a new prison? What is the intention? Is the intention to grow the population or to create a new facility that is more updated than the current one? This has been a really, really robust conversation and a really important one, because building a new prison isn't something we should do lightly, and sentencing reform isn't something we should do lightly. And I am grateful to all of those who have participated in the conversation about sentencing reform, because we are talking about thousands of people's lives, and we are talking about intergenerational poverty. We are talking about children who are being left behind. So I think this is an extremely important conversation. And I think this is an extremely respectful conversation about a very, very important document and what we are doing as stewards of the taxpayer dollars. Anytime one of the agencies comes in and testifies in opposition to a bill and their opposition is based on the money, I always say, whether I agree with the bill or not, that's not their concern. What I want to know from them is, can you do this or can you not do this? Whether or not there's money for something is our job. It is our job to be stewards of the people of the state and their tax dollars. That is our job. That is our number one job. Our number one priority should be being the best stewards possible for the taxpayers of Nebraska and doing the most good with those dollars. I don't believe a prison is the most good if it isn't coupled with sentencing reform. We need both. They need to be together. And I think that's a really, really important conversation to be had. There's a whole host of other things in this bill that I think are worth talking about. On the previous bill, there was like 3 hours taken on talking about Offutt Air Force Base. I kind of thought that it was being
1 minute.
eulogized the way that it was being talked about. Thank you. Everyone approaches this job differently. There's no reason to be critical of people who are passionate about the policy at hand and act like it's not genuine, because it is genuine. I genuinely care about each of these cash funds, how they're being used, and if they're necessary. If I didn't, I wouldn't be in Lincoln at 10:10 on March 24th. I'd be asleep at home. So thank you, Mr. President. I'll get back in the queue. I think I have one more time and then my close.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Lathrop, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. Good evening once again. We're getting a little bit closer to a cloture vote, and so I did want to take this opportunity to talk about the vote that will be coming up, and I think it's a 10:30 vote. I did suggest to the speaker that when my kids were little, sometimes like at 7:30, I'd turn the clock up to bedtime, like 8:30, and tell them, it's time to go to bed, kids. And I suggested to the speaker that if he had some control over this clock and he wanted to move it straight to 10:30, I'd be fine with that. But until that time, I do want to say that I'm in opposition to, though I appreciate having an opportunity to speak a few more times with the bracket motion, I'm in opposition to Senator Kavanaugh's bracket. The two amendments need not be attached to the LB 1013. There's no point in having them attached. So when we do get to cloture, I ask that you vote in support of cloture so that we can move this bill on to final reading. And along the way, when we have an occasion to vote on the motions and the amendments on the board, that you vote no on the bracket and no on the two Lathrop amendments. I also want to take this time and say something very sincerely, and that is, I know that we've spent a good deal of time talking about prisons and talking about corrections reform, and I hope you appreciate that this is a topic that's very important to me, and it's not important to me because I have somebody that I know or love or care about that's in the Department of Corrections, but it's important to me because as long as I've served, I have looked for big problems facing the state. I've invested time learning everything there is to know or everything I can learn about those topics, put the time and the energy in to determining a solution and then bringing it to the floor. And this one happens to be one that is not really been part of sort of our political culture in Nebraska. We have been in the tough on crime culture in this state for long enough to realize the problems we have in overcrowding. And for that reason, it was important that we spend some time educating those who are listening, educating the public, which I think is very important when we're talking about making changes to our criminal justice system and our Department of Corrections, and then talking about it in the context of a budget bill or budget bills, because, colleagues, this is no different than setting up a new program that's going to cost us millions of dollars a year. It's no different than if we set up a number of programs and funded them in appropriations, and everyone would stand up and say, for the love of God, we can't afford this. It's not sustainable. We don't want to do this to the budget. We don't need to be growing government. But that's precisely what inaction in this arena is going to mean to the state of Nebraska. And I will end my remarks tonight where I began several days ago. We have a crisis at the Department of Corrections. We do need to build capacity, and we don't know what we need until we have been through the process of determining corrections reform, so that we can identify
1 minute.
thank you, Mr. President, what our growth in population will be over the next 10 years or 20 years. And when we know what that's going to look like, when we are able to chart our growth in prison population, whether that's flat or has some growth, then it will inform the decision on what we need to build, how much we need to build, and what it should look like. Should that be maximum, medium, low custody, or community corrections beds? And that really is why it is very important and I would say critical that when we talk about this crisis, we begin the process by determining the long-term strategy, and that begins with criminal justice reform, in my estimation. I I mean this sincerely, I very much appreciate your patience over the last several days, your attention to the remarks, the data, the things that I've been handing
Time,
out,
Senator.
and your questions. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. Senator John Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Senator Lathrop's always a tough act to follow. So this, I would echo the comments everybody's made. The reason that so many individuals been talking about this for so many hours is because this is so important. And it is a serious issue, as Senator Lathrop talked about, facing the state of Nebraska going forward, and that it has not been addressed in a responsible way for a long time because of a desire to score political points. There's an article, I think that it's on the judiciary's website, from the World Herald about a decision this legislature made in the not too distant past to make increased penalties on a number of offenses that has resulted in increasing the population in our state correctional facilities. And some of the people who pushed for that regret that decision because they realize that they made it for the wrong reasons. And so what people have been talking about here, the facts and the data, and that we don't really need to go over that again and again. We have, but we continue to. And I have, partly because the number of people I've talked to after the number of hours we've had this conversation who still, I don't think it hasn't quite sunk in about the gravity of the situation, the magnitude of the problem, and the clarity of the solution. The answer is clear, that we need to make reforms in how we are doing this. That if we continue in the path that we are on now, that we will have a problem that will run away from us. We are currently have the most overcrowded prisons in the country. We have the fastest growing, and I think I don't know if we are number one in growth, but we're one of the only states that is growing in its population. We have the actual number of people entering the facilities is going down. The number of people remain in the facilities is going up. We have repeat offenders. We have low-level offenders. We have longer sentences, more stacked sentences. We have disproportionate application of law across the state, which should be very concerning to people. And when I say disproportionate application, I mean some people are getting treated differently based off of where they're from. And that is a big concern. That means that justice in one part of Nebraska is not the same as it is in other parts of Nebraska. And that is leading to the overcrowding crisis we have in our penitentiary. And it is leading to the population, I don't think it's on this screen, being disproportionate. Trying to get back to this. No, it's in here somewhere. Here we are. This is on the CJI screens, page 23. Nebraska adult population, 82% white. Admissions to Nebraska Department of Corrections by race, 57% white. Population, Nebraska population, 9% Hispanic. Population in the Department of Corrections, 13% Hispanic. Nebraska population by race, 4% Black. Nebraska admissions by race, 22% Black. And then Native American is 1% of the state and 6% of the admissions. So we are disproportionately locking people up in different parts of the state, and we're disproportionately locking people up by race in this state. And that is another problem we haven't really addressed or talked about very much, because we've been specifically talking about the problem in a very objective data standpoint, and we've been talking about it in a very solution-oriented standpoint in the last several days. And so I appreciate the conversation everybody's been undertaking here, and I hope everybody takes the time in their free time to look at some of these information that's on the judiciary's website, and takes a look at these, and take a look at 920 and the solutions that are presented there. They are common sense. They're not scary. They're not revolutionary, but they will make a substantial difference in our overcrowding crisis we have in the Department of Corrections. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, colleagues. It's been about 10 minutes since you last heard from me. So a lot has happened in my life in the last 10 minutes. I sat here for a little bit, I walked around, and then I came back here again. I know it's very late, and I have this motion up here, and I believe Senator Lathrop said that he did not like my motion. And if those of you that were in here earlier, I did start out by saying, please don't vote for my motion. But just to make extra certain that nobody's going to vote for my motion, I am going to pull my motion, so we don't have to worry about it. So, Mr. President, Mr. Clerk, I'd like to pull my motion to bracket until April 5th. And I should have made it April 1st for somebody's birthday next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. Your motion is withdrawn. Senator McCollister and Senator Hunt, you have already spoken 3 times. Senator John McCollister. He has also spoken 3 times. Senator Michaela Kavanaugh, you are recognized, and this is your final opportunity.
Well, golly, aren't I a lucky gal? Oh, I would love to yield some time to my dear colleague, Senator Megan Hunt.
Senator Hunt, you are yielded 4 minutes 50.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Senator Kavanaugh. I still stand perplexed about the reason that we want to grow capacity of our prisons, but we don't want to take steps to reduce the rate of incarceration in this state to the point where we're going to be locking people up at a rate faster than we're building beds to house them, than we're building prisons to keep them in. And I think the truth is that a lot of the people in this body don't mind locking folks up because they think it would never be them. It would never be their family. It would never be their loved one. It's always someone else. And it's always someone else who deserves it because our justice system is always fair. Because in the experience of most of us colleagues, most of you who are white, who are male, who are wealthy, who are property owners, which we know for how much you complain about property taxes. For most of you, you don't think that this could be you or your kids or your family, and you're straight up not interested in reform because you believe that people should have to pay for their mistakes forever in Nebraska. And this is reflected through the other types of policies you support. It can't be enough to incarcerate someone for a drug conviction. You have to keep punishing them after they serve their time by saying they can't access food stamps. And it's policy after policy like this, where the people who are really the bad guys, the capital F felons, it could never be you. And so you don't have to worry about where they go. We just have to keep building prisons so we have space for them. Mr. President, I'd like to ask Senator McCollister a question.
Senator McCollister, would you yield?
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Do you have any further thoughts to share, Senator McCollister?
I do. As we end this particular session tonight, what is the legacy of this legislature going to be? Are we going to come together and deal with this problem of prison overcrowding, and in some way that is a credit to this body? Are we going to continue to kick the can down the road? Those are my thoughts. Thank you, Senator Hunt.
Thank you, Senator McCollister. Colleagues, adding new prisons, expanding prison capacity without reform is going to be a waste of money. And maybe you feel comfortable with that because it's never going to be you or your kids in that prison. Maybe you feel comfortable with that because it's not your money. Because we've got all of these funds in Nebraska burning a hole in our pocket. And by the time we have to build yet another new prison, all of us are going to be out of here thanks to term limits. And so we're not going to bear the responsibility of these decisions. But it also reflects a pattern of behavior in this legislature, our habit of setting aside large sums of money for things that are not certain yet, whether that's a canal or a lake that's supposed to bring so much recreation and fun to Nebraskans, or a prison that we don't yet know what kind of capacity we have to have for that prison. Colleagues, whether it's a prison or a lake, I don't see how this is anything other than a handout, a gift of taxpayer money to a handful of engineers and contractors who are going to take this money, do their little studies and feasibility studies and everything, and find out either that we're going to have to build another prison soon, so please give me another check, Nebraska taxpayers.
1 minute.
Or it's not going to be possible. The governor will be gone, Scott Frakes will eventually be gone, all of us senators will be gone from here, and we'll be worse off than we started. But we know that none of us are going to be on the hook for the blame. And that's irresponsible. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Hunt. Senator Lathrop, you are recognized, and this should be your close.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. You know, as I look at this issue, I appreciate that there is a diversity of opinion on the way forward. To me, looking at the chart that I've handed out, and I've waved this around for a week, and the one thing about facts is they can be pretty stubborn. They can be pretty stubborn, and we cannot put our head in the sand and pretend like this isn't our reality here. When I was down in my office and I talked to Josh Henningsen, who, by the way, has been here through every bit of this, and I said, Josh, we need a graph that illustrates this problem, illustrates the facts, the very simple facts of the problem. And he came up with this chart, and I've been handing it out over and over, and I hand it to anybody that I talk to about this, only because it so clearly illustrates our problem. And You know, we come and go in this place. We get to serve for 4 years at a time, and after 2 terms, you're term limited, and you don't know when you campaign and when you're knocking doors and you tell people, I'm going to go down to Lincoln and try to get your property tax relief, or I'm going to go down. You don't campaign on these kind of issues, but when you show up, you don't know which of these issues are going to be and come up on your time. And this issue has come up on our time. And it's not something that we can say, oh, I'm not going to worry about it. We'll let somebody else deal with it. This chart demonstrates what happens when you don't deal with it, right? We've gotten ourselves in this position. Having studied what happened during the Heinemann administration in 2014 in our Special Investigative Committee, the Department of Corrections was begging them to expand capacity, and Governor Heinemann chose not to. And Governor Ricketts has done his level best to expand capacity, and it simply looks like we're chasing that line with millions of dollars in construction. We've spent $150 million trying to catch up with the population that's over at the Department of Corrections, and we can't do it. It's not sustainable. So this problem is no different than establishing some new program that everybody's reluctant to do around here because it's going to add to our ongoing expense. We added $150 million in capacity, or will have by this summer, and $10 million in operating costs, and we've gotten no closer to having that operational capacity line catch up to the average daily population. And other states across the country, over the last decade, only 2 states have grown their population while every other one has gone down. We're out of step. And it's our turn to solve a problem and then to inform our constituents. This is why we did it. It is a financially irresponsible not for us to move forward to address this problem. And I didn't expect when I got into this business 16 years ago that this would be what we're working on, but it's our turn. It's our turn. We have a significant issue. We need to solve a significant issue, and we can no longer kick the can down the road and expect somebody else to solve it or act like it's not a real problem. And with that, thank you once again for your patience, for your attention, and your willingness to hear me out. Again, these 2 amendments do not need to be passed. You can vote no on them, but please vote for cloture, and let's move 1013 on to final reading. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lathrop. Mr. Clerk, you have a motion on the desk.
I do, Mr. President. Senator Stinner would move to invoke cloture pursuant to Rule 7, Section 10.
It is the ruling of the chair that there has been fair and full debate afforded to LB 1013. Senator Stinner, for what purpose do you rise?
I'd love it if we have a call of the House. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Stinner. There has been a request to place the House under call. The question is, shall the House go under call? All those in favor vote yes. All those opposed vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
31 ayes, 5 nays, place House under call, Mr. President.
The House is under call. Senators, please record your presence. Those unexcused senators outside the chamber, please return to the chamber and record your presence. All unauthorized personnel, please leave the floor. The House is under call. Senator Pansy Brooks, would you please check in? All members are accounted for. Members, the first vote is on the motion to invoke cloture. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have you all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
41 ayes, 3 nays for the motion to invoke cloture.
The motion to invoke cloture is adopted. Members, the next vote is on the adoption of AM 2256. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Have all voted? Record, Mr. Clerk.
No ayes, 41 nays on the adoption of the amendment.
The motion is not adopted. Members, the next vote is on the adoption of AM 2252. All those in favor, vote aye. Those opposed, vote nay. Record, Mr. Clerk.
No ayes, 41 nays on the adoption of the amendment, Mr. President.
Members, we will now vote on the advancement of LB 1013. All those in favor, say aye. All those opposed, say nay. LB 1013 is advanced. Items, Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, Senator Day introduces legislative resolution 360 that'll be referred to the exec board, and Senator Bostar introduces legislative resolution 361 that'll also be referred to the executive board. Finally, Mr. President, priority motion. Senator Brewer would move to adjourn the body until Friday, March 25th at 9:00 a.m.
Members, you've heard the motion to adjourn until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. All in favor say aye. Opposed say nay. We are adjourned.